Hello and welcome. I'm Maria from Sew Through Time, and last year I made an Edwardian simple evening gown out of cotton sateen. I loved the shape of it, but unfortunately my body changed a little and I can no longer lift my arms up properly, so it was time to make another one. This time around I wanted to make something a bit more fancy with more details and a little bit more high-end materials and more couture-like techniques. So what I started out with was, first I created a Pinterest board to kind of see what kind of things I liked, and then before settling down on a specific type of gown, I headed over to fabric stores, both online and in person, to see what my options were material-wise. Because we don't really anymore have all the materials that they had available for them. At least not readily available and not at a decent price. Things like lace just doesn't get made in the variety that it did back then. So looking at my options material-wise, different kinds of silks, especially silk satins, were very common. And then they would often have overgowns made out of lace or net on top of that. And they were often embroidered or beaded or beadwork embroidery or whatever on top of that. I wasn't willing to go all out with a full beaded gown for this, so I looked at my other options and I didn't really find a lace that I would like. And as for sequins fabrics, there were some nice ones, but nothing looked really right for this era. So what I ended up choosing was a rayon back satin. It has that thickness to it and that luster, and it feels, the way it moves, it is very similar to a Duchess satin, but only half of the price tag. And when I had chosen this satin, what I did was I went back to my Pinterest board and then I looked at my options, that what I could make with this satin without having to do a full beaded, embroidered, really out there design. And I really fell in love with this fashion plate from 1902.
I did not want to copy it exactly, so I set off by drawing out my design. I found this amazing Edwardian fashion drawing template from a period sewing manual, which I'll link down below in case you too would want to play Edwardian fashion designer.
Okay, here it is, the drawn out design. I think these are all going to be sparkles. I don't know if I'm going to edge it with a sparkle or what I'm going to do there, probably. But I'm glad I drew this out because I realized as I drew it that I actually really like the plain sleekness and I prefer leaving any ruffles off. I had planned on doing with the satin a self ruffle onto the edge, but I think I'm going to leave that off. I think I'm going to leave it plain. I prefer the sleek look of it, at least drawn. We'll see when I actually finish the version. To be able to show you all the details and steps that go into making a couture quality Edwardian evening gown like this, and not have this be a full-length feature film, I decided to cut this into 2 parts. In this one, I'm going to show you the skirt construction. I'm using the book Dressmaking Up to Date. It is a period sewing manual from 1905, and it is my absolute favorite thing from this era. And also it can be found for free on Archive. I'll link it down below. For my pattern, I'm using the Victoria skirt pattern from 1901. It can be found also for free on Marquise DE. I've also used the skirt pattern before when I made my cherry blossom skirt, so I kind of knew how I wanted to tweak it. In that pattern, the front piece has an odd angle to it, and it kind of makes a front bulge that I don't think was supposed to be there. So this time I decided to just make it straight from the high hip to the waist in the front piece, and then that extra little bit that I had of fabric at my waist, then that was taken in at the back. So basically I ended up using this pattern as a pleated back skirt instead of the tailored back that I did last time. And again, I did the same mistake as I did last time I sewed this pattern. The dip in the waist it dips down toward the front, but it also dips down towards the back instead of continuing in one line. It is highest at the hip point. So I attached my side back pieces on the wrong side.
For the hem facing, Dressmaking Up to Date gives you a few options. I followed the ones for the simple finish. You start by cutting out a 3.5-inch bias strip of crinoline and a 4-inch wide piece of the skirt fabric. I personally prefer cutting these on the actual shape of the skirt rather than on the bias, but you can do it either way. Then you are supposed to turn up the silk and crinoline and baste, but I was feeling lazy, so I just machine sewed them together. Then the instructions tell you to face it with the silk. I'm assuming a hem stitch, but I'm not sure. Just make sure your stitching isn't visible on the right side. For the top edge, you'll have to go through the right side with your stitches, but try to keep them small with only a few threads from the fashion fabric to keep it from showing too much. All of this tiny hem stitching around a 180-inch hem will seem like it will take forever, but in the end it will be worth it, I promise you.
I'm finally done! Yay!
Next, a box pleated taffeta ruffle 4 inches wide and 3 times the length of the hem is pinked. That basically means that the edges are cut with wavy or zigzag edge shears. You'll also need a dust ruffle in the same width. For this, the book doesn't give you a length, but I went for 1.5 times the skirt hem length. You can box pleat the ruffle by eye, it doesn't need to be super precise, and then baste it through the middle. Technically, the instructions say that the ruffle should be cut on the bias, but I see no real purpose for that, and also modern silks aren't really tightly woven enough to hold a pinked edge on a bias piece. Then you stitch it fast onto the skirt through that basting, making sure the hem of the ruffle is equal with the hem of the skirt. I'm not sure what they mean by fast stitching, but I'm going to take it as rather big and sloppy stitches. Just make sure they don't show through the fashion fabric side. Then on to that dust ruffle. I connected the strips to form one continuous piece. With the long stitch length, I sewed gathering threads 3/4 of an inch from the top edge of the ruffle. Then it is sewn on through this gathered shirring. Make sure that both edges of the box pleated ruffle are facing down below the dust ruffle, but do not iron it down. You want that fullness from the open box pleats. This will help keep the hem away from your feet as you walk, especially at the front, and keep you from tripping on your long hem even at floor length. Again, remember to make sure that your stitches are not visible on the right side. At this point, I had been stitching this hem in various ways for nearly a week, and I started seriously questioning the writer's use of the word simple and calling this the simple way of finishing an evening gown hem. The main difference between finishing an evening gown hem versus a regular skirt hem seems to be the addition of more ruffles to the skirt and lack of hem binding to protect the edge from wear and tear. This is probably because these are meant mostly for indoor use, with only short carriage rides outdoors, not a lot of outdoor walking. So if you plan on using your skirt in situations where more walking outdoors is required, I'd recommend finishing it like a regular skirt rather than an evening gown to better accommodate our modern world. You could still add those ruffles, but just bind that hem if you plan on walking outdoors. Lastly, the instructions tell you to tack the dust ruffle down every 14 inches with a French tack. This is done by sewing the dust ruffle through the box-pleated ruffle to the silk satin facing with a 1/2 inch loose loop. Take the 3 stitches back and forth for more loops in the same place. Then you make knots around the loose strands like you would for a button loop. And then after making all the French tacks, all that was left to do was add the placket, insert the back pocket, and sew on the waistband and closures. This was basically done the same way as in a walking skirt, so I did not include that, as that can be found in my walking skirt video. If you are interested in watching that one, be sure to hit that like button on this one before you leave, and use the link above or down below to head on over to the walking skirt video. And here it is, the finished Edwardian evening gown skirt. Next time I'll be making the bodice with a lot of couture techniques and tricks, and the sequined overskirt to go over this, and then show you the final look. I hope you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you haven't already so that I'll see you again next time. Bye!